Hi guys, welcome back to another Draw With Me video. In today's video, we will be studying some compositions from the show Arcane, breaking down some of my favorite screenshots from season 1, analyzing how different compositional elements tell a story and elicit emotion, and applying them to my own illustration at the end. This exercise was really fun and helped to alleviate some recent art block and negative feelings with my work, so I hope my learning and discovery can help you as well. This video was also originally a full-length live stream from my Discord server, so if you want to see the full stream and draw along with me in real time, you can check out the link in the description below to my Patreon. Alright, let's get to drawing. So here are a bunch of the screenshots that I want to focus on today. Like I said, we're only going to pick 4, but these are, I couldn't just pick 4, so I decided, why don't you guys decide? So I don't have to pick which ones we're going to do. I'm going to treat this as like a very loose digital painting session and just think of more of the process rather than the outcome, since it's like a studying session. Keeping it loose, keeping it like focusing on what matters in the composition can be really helpful for like actually learning, and just staying loose and not worrying about perfecting things or getting hung up on little details. So yeah, it'll just be fun. Basically, you can focus on anything with this. I labeled it a composition stream because that's what I'm focusing on. So specifically like how the image is structured, the image, just analyzing how that image is telling the story of what's going on. Like how big are the characters? How small are they in frame? How are they framed by certain elements in the environment? Like all that sort of stuff. That's what I'm studying, but a lot of these screen caps are super cool color-wise, so if you want to study the color, that could be really interesting. If you want to study the gesture of a lot of these scenes, because I think like these fight scenes are super powerful. Even the gesture of these landscapes, that could be really interesting to study. But yeah, composition is such a big topic that's hard to necessarily like explain what I'm looking for, but it's mainly analyzing and like knowing what's going on in the scene and how the artist directed things to look to elicit like a certain emotion, a certain like character moment, or I guess that just means storytelling. What is the composition telling us from a story standpoint? And I think composition is one of the probably the most difficult things in like visual arts, because design in itself, it carries across so many fields, because then you have character design, you have like font design, you have environment design, like all of those tie into composition, and composition can mean, it has like so many things under it. And I think that's something I struggle with a lot with my work. I can have like the technical rendering skills and the overall like purpose and feeling that I want, but getting things to just flow in an image and make those like storytelling decisions with visual design, that's something I just need a bit more practice with. Now we are choosing between 5 and 6. I think I know which one's gonna win. I'm not gonna say. Wow. Did we even have to vote on this? Yeah, I thought the Viktor one would be chosen. It's a pretty cool scene, so. All right. So for this one specifically, your like brightest bright, which is gonna be white for us, is that like energy. I mean, I don't want to explain what it is because it may be like spoilery, but there's like this blob of energy that's like right here in this like lower third area. So when I'm thinking about breaking it down value-wise, I already added this black background to be the base layer. And then I look at the figures and see that they're sort of like this mid-tone. So I'm basically looking for like dark, which would be the black, the mid-tone, which would be the figures, and then the whitest or like the brightest area of the image, which would be like this energy mass. So I would take like a mid-tone, probably something a little bit darker than just like the middle gray, and just start to block in the figures. And when you're studying the values, you're asking yourself, why did they set it up like this? Like, why is this the brightest bright? And why are these characters more of a mid-tone and then the background being so dark? And it's all because so that it can be readable and so that this brightest part of the image, because of the heavy contrast that's going on, because of this brightest section and the super dark room, our eyes immediately go to this area and then they probably travel up to the character's face and then just lead us around the image with these different particles and stuff. I would say there's like these, I don't know what they would be called, these like wisps that are also kind of a mid-tone. I'd like to think that because this is such an intense moment in the episode, that like super high contrast of these super dark darks and this super bright white kind of like matches with that intensity of what's going on. Because you wouldn't really want to have, I mean, it could be unsettling if you had maybe this room was entirely lit in like morning light and it was super bright, and then you had something like chaotic like this happening to the characters. That could be really interesting, but there is more of an impact, and that high contrast leads to more of an intense feeling and helps your eye like immediately focus on this bright white of what's happening. If that makes sense. I hope this is making sense. So that's how like your value decisions can tie into your story decisions. Because if you have like super light values, very like harmonious and like soft looking, that can lead to more of a peaceful scene, nothing too crazy going on. But then you have films like Midsummer where like horrific things are happening in broad daylight, and it's kind of like that juxtaposition kind of unsettlingness, like why is this happening in like bright daylight? And that's part of the decision to do that. So I don't know, it's cool. The more I learn about it, I'm like, the more there is so much to learn about it. Like there's so much you can do with composition. I think that's what makes it really overwhelming and yet really cool. So now, since I have like these general things going on, I'm just trying to carve into these values to try and get a more specific shape of the figures. Like, I love Viktor's gesture in this, how he's being like pulled away. So I really want to try and get that tension of that. So straight lines. I may even add like a fourth tone in here, just so it can differentiate from the bright white. I might make these guys just a little bit bigger. I agree, Steven. This particular shot could also work really well as subtractive exercise. So where you're cutting away and, like Steven said, carving out the negative space. And that's exactly what I'm doing with the figures to try and give them a bit more information. And sometimes I feel like images like this, where you have these bright whites and these dark darks, are a lot easier to study because it's so clear, the value breakdown is so clear. What I really struggle with is when everything's kind of more like mid-tone and there's not exactly a clear, I don't know, the values can be a little bit more confusing, but it all depends on what your focus is in frame. Typically, the area of highest contrast is where your focus is. Typically. But also take this all with a grain of salt. I'm still learning myself, so this is just how I think of it right now. I'm pretty sure me from 2 or 3 years from now would be like, what is she saying? Or at least I'd have new insight. And I think the part that I'm doing now is the most difficult because I don't want to over render it, especially since this is just a study. But I just want to bring a little bit more clarity to the piece. I find that that's a big struggle area for me because I can get the loose sketch in and have fun, but then when it comes to rendering, I feel like it loses so much life. So that'll definitely be a focus for this year. What I do know is that if your values aren't clear, your colors aren't going to be clear either. So doing like these value studies can really help you in your paintings with clarity and just like the overall design. All right, that's it for number 3. How'd we feel about that one? I felt like I loosened up a ton, and I actually really like how this turned out. Challenging, but really funly. That's good. Color of Chaos, definitely learning as well. Been meaning to do black and white digital studies for ages, never know how to start. I'd say always stick with like only 3 to 4 values. Have your white, black, gray, and maybe like 1 extra gray if you need it, and try and break down any image that way, and you can learn so much. Okay, these look amazing. Hazel, nice. You got that bright white hitting them. It's working really well. I would say don't be afraid to get even looser, especially with this scene. There's so much like circular movement happening and like these like figures at odds with each other, kind of like pushing up against each other. I'll try and like get that like energy. Chimera, super cool. I know that you did the color. This looks really cool. A very purple scene. Yeah, sorry to my traditional artists. The only way it could have worked if you had like a really like dark marker and you did like a really quick block in of everything, but you would have to like conserve the whites. Already draw out like where your widest or your lightest light is going to be, and then just draw around it. Kind of like watercolor. Taito. I still love like the energy you're bringing into your lines, even though you're not a fan of this one. I think it works really well. Sometimes like the fastest we do can like capture exactly what we need, so that's really cool. This is awesome. Great job, Nyx. And you did like exactly what I was talking about, like having that highest area of contrast right in that like energy blob thing, and our eyes go right to it, and then we go to the face, and then we go to the rest of the composition. Nice. Yeah, great job everyone. You guys really nailed it with this one. Maybe it has to do with the subject matter. Maybe we have a bunch of Viktor stans in the chat. And now it's time to thank the wonderful people who make my channel possible, my lovely patrons. With their support, I'm able to work on bigger and better video projects for 2025, like an upcoming My Little Pony characters as D&D characters video. They also help me to work on upcoming comic projects and maintain all the live streams and events that I host on our Discord server. So if you're interested in seeing more of my creative process, get sneak peeks on future projects, if you're interested in a monthly sticker club, or joining my Patreon Discord of super encouraging and passionate artists of all kinds, make sure to check out the link to my Patreon below. And yeah, thank you guys so much for your support. It truly means a lot to me. And yeah, let's get back to the video. All right. I see we might be choosing the simpler one. I think I'm gonna do color because I feel like that would be a bit more of a challenge. 8 can be complicated. Like, how would you break that down value-wise? It can be a little confusing. With the Blades of Grass Clutter of Chaos, I would suggest just like turning them into shapes. I would say, I'm just gonna draw on top of this. So how my brain would see this, it would see this kind of as like one shape, and then this patch over here as one shape. And instead of getting immediately lost in the weeds of all these strands of grass, blades of grass, you just break it down into that one shape. Maybe you start cutting away and you have the blades of grass and just adding some detail here and there. Because in this image, your focus isn't the blades of grass. Your focus is Caitlyn. So you want to put like the most like detail and attention to Caitlyn, and then the rest can kind of fall away and just be supportive to Caitlyn. Yeah, I mean, it would be fun to do all these like little blades of grass because there's so much color variation. Like you have these purples going on, these reds, these greens, these oranges. That's really beautiful just in like this little swatch of the composition. But if you're studying this for like storytelling wise, then I would say to really focus on how the character is in the scene and how the scene supports the character and what they're doing. And also sort of like the feeling that I get from this composition is that we're like kind of hidden in the grass looking at what's happening in the scene. Like it almost feels kind of stealthy, kind of like hunting sort of. Which is kind of like what Caitlyn is doing in the scene. It's not a spoiler at all, but she's doing like this target practice. So it's a lot of strategy and maneuvering through things, maneuvering through the woods. So I feel like this little shot kind of conveys that feeling. How would you explain the transition of the background values? I would say it's very it's very high key. So probably, since this is just like a 15-minute study, I would probably make that either gray, like this gray color, or the white color, and just put in some like really soft values, because the reason why this background works so well and creates so much depth in the image is because these values that are in it are really close, so there's not a ton of contrast, as opposed to Caitlyn over here, this dark blue and this dark brown against this really light green and this really like pale bluish color. It makes her stand out, and that's where our eye wants to focus. So for the background, I would say keep it simple. It's only like 2 values, and they're like barely different from each other. They're really close. That's another component of values, value grouping. I don't want to get into that because I'm going to end up like saying something confusing, and I'd rather explain that in like a video or something. But yeah, TLDR, the background, super light, just keep it as light as possible, probably. So for this image, even when I'm doing color, I'll try and think about how I would break it down black and white, and looking at the like large masses in the painting. So you have this big shape of the grass. So I think I want to start with that. I'm just using a watercolor brush because I feel like that would kind of get the effect that I would want. Okay. I think it's always helpful to establish at least some sort of tone down before you paint. I kind of like how it's at an angle, and that angle kind of leads us down into the image. I think looking at things as just like shapes first and like big masses can be really helpful in just like setting up the painting and not getting overwhelmed with too many details. Yeah, so I have this kind of sandy orange color. Maybe do a bit of that subtractive painting, cutting away at it. I'm gonna do a little bit of the background. And what I was talking about, the value change being pretty subtle, and how that allows itself to fall away into the background, like literally, and create that depth so that the midground and that the foreground can stand out more. So that lack of contrast allows it to not distract us and to fall back into the image. There's like a really nice gradient happening from like the ground to the trees. I'm trying to get it with this like 100% opacity brush. I think that's good enough. Okay, let's move on. We don't want to get too caught up into just the background because that's not the focus of this scene. There's like this mossy tree, just like this muted, cool looking green. And as like the sunlight hits it, it just gets a little bit warmer, more yellow. And then this is like a little bit more yellow. I think the environment of this scene is like an overcast snow day. So there's not going to be a lot of harsh shadows anywhere. Okay, now I think we're ready to do a little bit darker foreground. Honestly, this may need to be, the foreground may need to be a little bit darker. I'm gonna pop in the foreground now, which is probably, with Caitlyn, it's probably the darkest part of the image. Now, I do foresee my painting being too light, maybe, compared to the reference. I caught myself doing what I said not to do, which is paint in the blades of grass. So I feel like it'd be better to just do these bigger strokes and then cut in later if we have time. So it's just being aware of what you're doing, trying to have habits that actually help you, then set you up for disaster in a painting. Which I feel like is something that I continually learn again and again. All right, now Caitlyn, since she's the focus, the value should be really dark against that tree. I even feel like this could be a bit more like vignetted, a little bit darker, because it feels like it's like closing in on her in this like competitive moment in what she's doing. Now I'm just starting to refine things. So just blocking in more of her figure. So it can, those like sharp edges can emphasize more that she's the focus of the painting or the image. I think the tree behind her needs to be a little bit darker. I find that a lot of the times I'm afraid to go too dark in lighter scenes like this. But sometimes it just takes a little bit of trial and error to find the right values. Yeah, maybe something more like that. And there's like a little bit of like red in the tree. So I'm kind of using, on my color wheel, I'm selecting more of a gray because of, I don't know if you've ever heard of simultaneous contrast, but when you have a gray, sometimes it takes the characteristic of the complementary color of the color that it's next to. So since this gray is next to green, it can show up more red, which is cool. Just gonna add in a bit more depth because I kind of feel like these are too separate from each other. And if you look at the reference image, you have like this pale green, red. It's just a lot paler grass that's different from the yellow grass that Caitlyn's in and the really dark grass that is in the foreground. Maybe this needs to be even darker. Yeah, I think so. This one was fun. I feel like it was pretty straightforward, but it definitely tripped me up that like some of the values weren't dark enough. Need to go a little bit darker. All right, let's see your guys's. Ooh, I see some bangers. Okay. All right, saw still. This is good. very line heavy and a little bit different from the original, like the reference image, but I still like how you kept in like the really dark foreground of the plants that were kind of like gazing in on the figure. Sun, this is awesome. I love the color variety that you got in here. I feel like I didn't like really capture the color as well. I think I was focusing too much on value, which is fine, but I feel like you really got all these like variations of greens, reds, oranges that are in the grass. It looks really cool. Nice. Steven, nice. Got the values perfectly. I love seeing like these different stages of the drawing. That's really cool. Juniper, this is great. I think that the values work super well in this one, and you can always tell because you zoom out and you can still like clearly read the image. Really nice. Chimera, nice. This looks really cool. This black and white version, I think you made it like a little bit darker than the reference, and it gives it so much more of a somber mood. And this is what I was talking about with your level of contrast and how that can elicit like a different range of moods based on how high the contrast is. And I feel like because this is such like a low mid-tone contrast, it feels like sadder, somber, slower, like something is like slowly unfolding in the story. It's really nice. And this is really great. I can clearly distinguish the values. It is a bit more saturated, but it kind of works, I think. It makes it seem more fun. But I still think this works. It just elicits a different feeling. I feel like more saturation tends to lead to like a happier, lighthearted, maybe more rich story moment. Clutter of Chaos. I really like how high key this is because the original image is pretty light. I think if you just did like one more layer of grass here in the foreground, it would really make there be a lot more depth in this. But this is a great job. Nice. You all did an amazing job. And the past ones too. So cool. I think it was really good for myself to do these things. I've been in a bit of a art rut lately for what feels like a couple months now. So it's always good to change things up and find new ideas through studying other pieces of art. So yeah, these are purely for learning. They're not like portfolio pieces or anything. They're not supposed to look pretty or finished. They're just supposed to be like a learning moment and really focusing on your process and how you're thinking and yeah, enjoying it as well, because Arcane has some really cool moments in the show and they depict them so artistically through their compositional choices. They're really helpful for any sort of art form, like animation, illustration, character design, even learning like compositional things can translate to design. So yeah. Really loose studies and letting go of control have been helping me a lot with working through some burnout and art block from last year. I think I just pushed myself too much for too long and expected so much from myself in my art that I lost the fun and play that was so closely associated with creating. As I was studying these stills from the film and thinking more about Arcane's story as a whole, I was really inspired to create a standalone piece and put some of my own compositional skills to work to apply what I've learned. It's a really great habit to do art studies and practice your technical art skills, but you learn so much more through the act of applying what you just learned to an actual piece, further cementing and deepening your understanding of the skill you acquired. Failure is a possibility. In fact, most of the times it's a certainty that you don't get something right the first time, but through those mistakes with active exploration and spontaneous creation, I think that's where we truly learn and grow. This whole idea of perfectionism and demanding so much of our abilities plays a key role in the arc of Viktor's story, and that struggle, that lack of accepting the truth of our shortcomings on a personal level and on a societal level, and still loving ourselves for it, that's what I was exploring with this piece. There's a lot of Viktor and Jace moments in Arcane with butterfly imagery, possibly referencing chaos theory and the butterfly effect, so I wanted to wrap that into this piece about perfectionism and how we deal with our flaws. Thinking about how one perfectionistic thought can rattle into thousands of obsessive actions and change the course of your life and the world around you for better or for worse. This catalyst creating a completely different reality. I wanted to depict a Viktor we see at the beginning of the show contrasted with his eventual epiphany in the last episode. Seeing beauty in imperfections, a torn butterfly wing, and yet still able to fly. And the really important statement that he makes at the end, that there is no prize to perfection, only an end to pursuit. And with this being one of my first finished illustrations of the year, I want to remember with each project I tackle, each painting I plan, and every video that I post, that perfection is not the goal. It's the continual process of rediscovery, exploration, learning from mistakes, and enjoying the journey of creation and connecting with others. Thank you all so much for drawing along with me in today's video. It was a lot of fun to dissect these screenshots from one of my favorite shows and analyze all these compositions and how they impact how we see the characters and their world, and eventually applying all of that to my own piece. I definitely want to continue studying more stills from this show and continue to improve my compositional skills for future projects. And I hope you'll join me by subscribing, following me on Instagram, or checking out the Patreon, or just liking this video. So thank you again to my patrons for the support. I will see you in the next video. All right, bye guys.